Hi everyone, it's Nicole for Simon Says Stamp with some cards featuring new stamps, dies, and stencils from the Simon Says Stamp Fun and Festive release. This is their latest release, chock full of amazing stamps and dies, definitely geared towards the holidays and beyond, but some great new product that I'm really excited to share with you. We're going to start with this card featuring new Critter Sweaters stamp set, coordinating dies, and then we're also going to be implementing quite a few other products in this as well. I'm starting by cutting apart the Critter Sweater dies, and these are large-ish size dies that create a bear, a cat, and a bunny. So you get all three in this Critter Sweaters die set. And then the stamp set has all these patterns that you can make sweaters on these critters, plus it has the adorable faces for the animals, some sentiments, and the little round circle you can make little pink cheeks with. So you can really make some cute critters. I'm going to die cut mine from some Nina Smooth white cardstock. And then these are going to be completely customized with stamping and coloring with Copic markers. We're going to start by adding the faces to the critters. This is the way I like to start this, and that is by adding in a face. So let's grab the bear's face. In this case, it's a polar bear. You could also make it another kind of bear, just depending on what colors you use. And I want to figure that out. I'm going to use my MISTI to help make sure I get it stamped exactly where I want it to go. If I need to stamp it more than once, I'm able to do that really easily. And we're going to ink up the face with some Hero Arts Intense Black ink. This is a great ink for Copic coloring that's not going to smear. I'm also going to take the little cheeks image and stamp that with Cotton Candy Simon Says Stamp ink to create some pink cheeks on my bear. Then I'm going around the edges with some warm gray markers just to add a tiny bit of color only to the top head portion of my bear. The rest of the image I'm going to imagine as a sweater, and we're going to customize that with some of the border stamped images from the Critter Sweaters stamp set. I'm blending out my light warm grays with a colorless blender anywhere there might be a harsh line. I added in some eyelashes with a fine tip black pen. And then we're going to take our MISTI again, and we're going to stamp our borders from this onto our bear. And this is going to give it that great sweater look. So this bear is going to have a gray and red sweater on white with some alternating kind of rickrack, double lines, and snowflakes. And I am going to use Simon Says Stamp Smoke and Lipstick Red inks to do this. And I'm simply going to just kind of keep alternating these until I get the look exactly the way I want it. I found it easier to kind of go row by row, so I got my spacing just right, but you probably could figure it out enough to stamp multiples at a time if you wanted to as well. If you're going to do all one color, you could definitely go ahead and put them all down and do that. You will see me do that with the other two sweaters because those will be stamped and embossed in white over colored sweaters. If you're going to do multiple colors of ink though, I like to just kind of do them one by one. And you can see I'm just alternating, building this cute sweater. These borders, while made to work with our critters here, also work great. Imagine customizing borders on cards. Imagine making stamped patterns on tags. All kinds of other die cuts. These just are really fantastic and will work to make all kinds of great borders on lots of or backgrounds on different cards. So lots of ways to use these. You get a ton of them in this. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 different borders in this. That's a lot. So you can really do a lot. I'm only using a fraction of that today. And then you get the faces and the sentiments. So this is a really awesome stamp set. We're going to finish adding the stripes to our polar bear sweater, and then we'll move on to coloring in the cat image and also the bunny, and then adding the awesome texture to these. Now, I got a little smudge of something on my bear, and so I'm using a Tombow mono eraser to remove that. And then I really felt like I probably didn't get enough coloring on the top of this bear. I started very, very light. So I'm going to go in and add even more with my warm gray markers. I've also added highlights to the eyes with a white pen and added a highlight to the nose with a white pen. So, so cute. I just think these are phenomenal. Really clever and very fun. The cat, let's go ahead and stamp the cat's cute face. Adorable little faces for these guys. I just think they're very, very cute. And I want to make sure I kind of imagine it right where I want it to go. Now for this guy, I knew I wanted to do kind of an orange striped tabby cat. And so we'll get the face, and I did stamp the cheeks with pink, but I'm going to tell you guys that I ended up coloring over these with Copic markers, and you're going to lose a lot of that definition. So what I'll do to get the pink cheeks back in the finished cat is I'll color those in with R20 Copic marker. So let's color in the sweater first, and then we'll color in the cat. And I'm just using some greens. This is G82, 94, and 99. This is going to make a really nice green sweater. And I want to get a nice blend. I like how it looks so cozy, like the cat's all wrapped up in its little sweater here. And then we're going to take E11, 08, and 09 and give this cat some fun little stripes. I'm working on the Tim Holtz glass matte, which really allows me to color very easily. I'm coming in off the sides. I love customizing die cuts with Copic markers. This is something that I've been doing quite a bit of in the last few weeks, and I love the look. So the base is E11, but the stripes are E08 and E09. R20 for the insides of the ears, the nose, and I did try to stamp the pink cheeks back over. I just didn't think they were quite dark enough, so I'll color those in with my R20 marker. Now let's customize this sweater, and this time I just decided to do some stripes just kind of along the upper chest portion of the sweater, and we're going to use the stitching detail, the lines, and the trees. We're going to put them all on our acrylic block or Misty stamp positioner tool all at once, stamp them all at once with Versamark ink or clear embossing ink, and then emboss with white embossing powder. I took more time fiddling with the placement of these stamps and figuring out exactly how I wanted them to go than actually stamping them. And this is going to give the great white, bold white pattern on a green sweater. Once we have him all colored in, let's grab our bunny die and we will finish with this little guy. This time the face and the critter kind of faces to the side, so you kind of have a profile of this one. We're going to stamp the face on the bunny and then color him in with E40, 43, and 44 for the bunny, and for the sweater are 35, 37, and 39. Now originally you can see I put a base of E40 all over my bunny. I kind of forgot that he needed a sweater, but luckily E40 is brick white and it's super, super light. So I'm able to go over it with my red markers. And let's go ahead and get our sweater done first, and then we'll move on to the bunny itself. This is going to be another example where the little cheek image probably isn't going to work really great because you won't show. It would if you used a different color of pink ink. I'm using a really light ink, and I just decided it was easier to grab my R20 marker and color in the cheeks on my critters rather than going back and grabbing another ink color from my stash. Now, just like the cat die cut, we are going to stamp some patterns onto the bunny with clear embossing ink and heat set with white embossing powder. And this time I'm going to repeat the pattern, and instead of moving my stamps, I can just move the die up in order to get that repeating pattern on my image. I'm using a powder tool, my Versamark or my clear embossing ink, stamping, embossing, and repeating this until my critter has a adorable little sweater here. So our critters are done, and we are ready to start on the background of this card. This card really features a lot of stamps and dies from the Fun and Festive release. I love the new Mod Trees background and decided that it would make the perfect backdrop to these cute critter sweaters images. So I've got a piece of Simon Says Stamp Smoke cardstock here. We're going to use a powder tool all over the background, stamp the Mod Trees background with clear embossing ink, and then we will sprinkle on white embossing powder to heat set that for white trees on a gray background. With all of the patterns and colors going on with our die cut images that we die cut and colored and stamped, I felt like I wanted something a little neutral in the background, and these white trees on gray is going to be perfect for that. I stamped it twice. We'll sprinkle on our white embossing powder. Now, once I have this completely heat set, I did decide I wanted a little more distressing, and so I'll take some picket fence distress paint, water it down, and flick it over my background with a small paintbrush. But let's make sure our trees are completely covered with our white embossing powder first before we move on to anything else. This panel is A2 sized, meaning it's 5.5 by 4.25 inches, and that's going to completely cover our A2 sized card base. I like to make sure my heat tool is really good and hot before I bring it to the paper. That's going to help reduce warping. Now, for the rest of this card, once we grab our distress paint and flick this over the background, so let's grab that paint now. And I am working, as I mentioned, on the Tim Holtz glass mat, which is going to provide and create really a palette. I can just make my palette right on this glass mat. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little of my white paint onto my glass mat surface. And I'm just double checking that everything looks good. And then I'm flicking that watered down paint over my background, and I'm going to let this air dry. It really will dry fairly quickly, and those little white splatters add just a really fun touch to the background of this card. And I just like to make sure I keep my surface relatively clean while I'm working, so I want to wipe that all up and get rid of that. Now I stamped sentiments from the Tiny Words Christmas stamp set, 3 different phrases from this, on some Lawn Fawn chili pepper cardstock using clear embossing ink and heat embossing with white embossing powder. I'm going to trim these into nice thin strips. I've also die cut one of the holiday words on a line greetings that says joyful wishes from some Lawn Fawn black licorice cardstock. And once we have our little phrases on the red cardstock trimmed into strips, we are ready to put it all together and finish off this really fun Critters card design. We're going to start with this white border along the bottom edge. We'll glue this down in place over the Mod Tree's background. We'll tuck our critters kind of underneath the edge of this. And then we're going to glue the Joyful Wishes die cut sentiment border in place over that holiday words on a line. There's 5 different greetings in this die collection, and they are so fun. I like these. Nice little size. We'll adhere our greetings with foam adhesive, and that card is all finished. Next, we are going to be creating a winter scene with this darling little stamp set here. Very fun. I've stamped my images on smooth white cardstock from Winter Scene, and I'm coloring them in with Copic markers. The colors I'm using are shown across the top of the screen there, so if any time you're wondering exactly which colors I used, that's where you can find this information. These are so cute, and it's going to create the most darling little scene that I think is really fun. It can be used in so many ways. I centered mine onto a background that I had inked and stamped. I did a little embossed resist here, but there's so many ways you can use this. I love that you can really customize the scene to fit whatever you want. I am using the trees, deer, house, stars, and moon, as well as the background from this winter scene stamp set. I colored in my trees first, then the deer. And instead of inking my background panel, we're actually going to color this with Copic markers, and I'm going to show you how I get that really pretty night sky for my card. But I colored in all my small images first. Added some little white dots to the backs of my deer. A different brown color combination for the stems of the trees. Some reds for the house. I wanted it to really show up. There's going to be a couple pops of red with the word Mary on the card, and then the house. And then the yellow stars and moon, and everything else is pretty much blue or black. I guess the trees are green. Y08 and 19 are what I used for the stars and the moon. And we'll come back and add a little snowy touch to the roof and color in the door, but let's get that night sky down. So I started with kind of a rough circle shape that I colored in with light colors, and then I'm going to just do a all over kind of just slightly darker blue color for my sky, and then we're going to blend out with even darker colors and another mid-tone. This is just a nice base to kind of start getting our paper saturated. The more saturated it is, it's going to blend better. So you can see this is super messy and looks awful. And you just have to be a little bit persistent and kind of keep working with your markers, which I'm going back with this now and trying to blend out some of those harsh lines. And we're going in with our dark colors, blending those. We're going to grab our mid-tone, blend with it until we get a seamless blend. And I worked on this. This was probably the most time-consuming part of the card, just trying to get this sky looking really, really good. And even that lighter area, I end up coloring over with B32. It's still going to stay nice and light, and it has that great little bit lighter mint undertone to it, but I want it to have a great seamless blend. And the more saturated the paper gets, the easier it is to blend, but it can bleed outside of your stamp line too, so be really aware of that as you're working. Mine did bleed in a couple places onto the snowy hills, but luckily the house and the trees cover that up, and so you aren't going to see that in the finished card. I added my very, very light blues to just the tops of my snowy hills, and then I am going to die cut all of these images with the coordinating winter scene dies. I'm also going to take a colorless blender, and I added some little lighter areas to the sky. This is going to be really nice because I'm going to go in with Nouveau Crystal drops in gloss white when I'm finished and add some bright white drops, but it'll be nice to have some lighter drops in the background. It really helps with that illusion of a falling snow background. The colorless blender doesn't blend, but moves that ink out and away. That's why you get those nice little light areas there. And then, of course, I added those same blue colors from the snowy hills to the roof of the house and any snow areas on the house. And some dark grays for the door on the house. For the background of this card, we're going to take a piece of smooth white cardstock, stamp it with the Outline Snowflakes background stamp using a clear embossing ink, and emboss this with white embossing powder. We're going to be doing an embossed resist design for this one, meaning we're going to emboss first, add the ink over it, and then buff away any ink that might be sitting on top of the embossed areas. And it's still going to give you that fantastic bright white outline and then the inky color back behind kind of look. Really fun snowflakes here, and create some amazing backgrounds. Lots of great ways to use this. We will heat set this with our heat tool. And then I'm going to add my distress inks. I am using regular distress inks today, but you could also use distress oxides if you think those are a little easier on a traditional cardstock. I'm going to use Mermaid Lagoon and Chipped Sapphire distress inks to create my background today. And I picked those colors because I thought that they closely matched the colors I used to color in the sky on my winter scene, or close enough, they complemented it nicely. So starting with Mermaid Lagoon on one side, and then we'll kind of blend that halfway or so and start adding the Chipped Sapphire. And you can see where the snowflake areas are resisting the ink. We're going to get a really fabulous graphic background here. Let's add some foam adhesive to the back of our winter scene and pop that up in the center of our background. I've also stamped the word Mary from the Simon and CZ Design Ornamental stamp set. I stamped that with Versamark ink, embossed with red embossing powder, and die cut it with the coordinating die. And I stamped a couple of phrases from this winter scene stamp set on black licorice cardstock using clear embossing ink, and embossed these with white embossing powder. So the word Mary is going to really stand out. That's that other pop of red I mentioned earlier. We're going to glue that down. We're building our cute little scene here in our winter scene box with the trees, house, and deer. We will save the stars and moon until after we get our sentiments where they're going to go. I'm adding all my sentiment strips to the card with foam adhesive as well to help it pop up a little bit. So this greeting reads, "Wishing you a Merry Christmas from our home to yours." We're going to glue those little stars and the moons down. And the final things we're going to do for this card is add Nouveau Crystal drops in White Blizzard to the stars and the moon. and the circle shapes in the background of the card. This is going to give little bits of sparkle to all of these. It's going to dry completely clear. It's a beautiful, clear, iridescent, sparkly material. We're going to take Nuvo Crystal Drops in Gloss White and add lots of snow to the background. And then we're going to take the Marvy Snow Marker and add that to the roof of the little house and anywhere there's snow. Heat set that so it puffs up and adds some really fun, cool texture. And these gloss white droplets add just the perfect touch. They're very nice and bright white. They show up fantastic against the blue background and really help with that illusion of falling snow. Now when you heat set the Marvy Snow Marker, you can see it puff up there. It looks awesome. Finally today, we're going to do a graphic ornaments card featuring the Ornamental stamp set from CZ Design for Simon Says Stamp. We're going to ink up our background with Lucky Clover and Twisted Citron Distress inks. And I am doing this on a smooth white cardstock, so it's going to take a little more effort to get a great blend, but I think it's worth it. And I'm going to lay down the Twisted Citron, but you'll see I go over most of that with Lucky Clover to mute it a little bit and get a little bit more of a natural transition so it's not such a harsh difference between the two colors. I really worked to get a good blend with my two colors before moving on with this card. And just like my other two cards, I have really worked today to add something of interest to the background. This time we're going to use the Lined Circles stencil and ink through this with Lucky Clover and Twisted Citron ink. Now the Twisted Citron I didn't feel like showed up very great, so I'm going to line my stencil back up and really lightly go over this with Lucky Clover, and I like that a lot better. Really, really fun. Now you can hit this with a heat tool if you want to, or you can let it sit and air dry. I want to do some stamping and embossing on it, and so I need it to be all the way dry before I can do that. I'm also going to stamp the ornament from the Ornamental stamp set 3 times with clear embossing ink. Heat emboss this with white embossing powder, and we're going to do a little embossed resist with the ornaments as well. So I'm going to die cut them first using the coordinating Ornamental die. And then we're going to ink these up with Picked Raspberry, Candied Apple, and Wilted Violet Distress inks. And you can see that the stamped and embossed shape resists the ink, so it's going to show up great. Now, just like the background, I'm going to want to stamp over these ornaments, and I need them to be all the way dry. I let mine air dry for about an hour or so, but you could also hit them with a heat tool if you want to stamp them immediately. And I wanted bright, colorful ornaments against the green of my background. I'm going to stamp Greetings from the Ornamental stamp set using a clear embossing ink. This reads, "Wishing you the happiest of holidays." If you want to pop up the word holidays, there is a coordinating die for that. I think that would be a cute look as well. I really love the bold white embossing on this dark green background, and I think it shows up beautifully. I'm also going to stamp the Ornamental designs on my ornaments. I've got a stripey design, a snowflake design, and then we'll use a small greeting from the Ornamental stamp set to customize each of these by stamping with clear embossing ink and heat embossing with white embossing powder. This is really going to make them stand out and show off. I'm using some tweezers to hold on to those and keep my fingers out of the way of the heat tool while I am finishing this up. I also trimmed down this background to 4 inches by 5 1/4 so that it'll have a nice white border all the way around. That white's really going to tie in nicely to our white embossing on this card. Now I first need to figure out where my ornaments are going to go, and then I need to attach these with foam adhesive and also some string. I'm using some DMC embroidery floss, but you could also use a really thin string or twine or something of the sort if you like that better. And I'm going to secure this to the back of each ornament with my foam adhesive. I want my ornaments popped up onto this background. And this is a really easy way to secure that to the back. And we're going to get our ornaments put in place first, secure them to the back, the string to the back second, and third we will add the little bows to the top of each ornament. So I just kind of want to make sure that they're all at varying lengths hanging down from the top of the card. So place the string there or the embroidery floss, secure it with foam adhesive, and then pop that down in place. These two ornaments overlap a little bit, and then the other one will be over by itself. Really simple but super pretty. One of my favorite images at Christmas time is ornaments. I think that there's so many great things you can do with them. I'm going to flip it over then, put some nice strong adhesive on the back, and then kind of pull each of these and bring them to the back and secure them into that adhesive. I want them nice and straight. Trim off some excess, and then I like to go over that again just to kind of hold it down and keep it secure. And then we're going to glue this whole panel down to our card base. I'm going to tie some of that embroidery floss into bows then, and glue it to the top of each ornament with a little glossy accents. And I just kind of made a small bow and tied that to the top of each. So there is what the bow looks like. We're going to snip the ends of this. I did glossy accents under, and then I did another little dab of glossy accents on top of the knot to help secure it. The glossy accents is going to dry clear and shouldn't show up, so it'll hold it a little bit more secure this way. Finally, I'm going to finish by taking some Nouveau Crystal Drops in White Blizzard to the tips on the snowflakes so they're sparkly. And I'm going to take Nouveau Crystal Drops in Gloss White and add some little white snowy droplets all over the background of the card. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this card showcase featuring the Fun and Festive release from Simon Says Stamp. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for card making and stamping videos. Here's a couple more cards that you might be interested in. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.